Iraj Abedian, economist and chief executive of Pan-African Investments and Research Services. And Iraj, we invited you on the show to talk to us about where the money will come from for the state of disaster, because it's essentially about unlocking funds so that we can deal with the energy crisis. But just hearing that conversation with the Secretary General of the ANC, does it appear clear to you how we got here? He says it's not the ANC, it's state capture, and you can't divorce that from the ANC, can you?
No, I think that is also a matter of record that Zondo Commission, no other than President Ramaphosa himself saying accused number one is at the ANC. So I think we can point finger at each other, quite frankly, Dudu. We need to, as a nation, leave that to the law enforcement agencies. And the immediate issue that we have is we have an energy crisis. And the declaration of a state of emergency, in my view, is putting the cart before the horse. The horse has to be a technical solution. Remember, energy is not an ideological or factional fight between the ANC or any other part of the society. It's a technical issue. We've allowed, as Mr. Muller, SG, articulated it clearly, a decade of a state capture and even longer going up to today has degenerated Eskom to organizationally, technically, financially, and in every other way. So we need to say what should be done to Eskom and what should be done to the national energy. They are not necessarily the same thing. But as far as Eskom is concerned, state of disaster is not going to sort it out. Eskom is a cancer of corruption, a hub of abuse and networks of mafia style of looting of public resources. So we need to not declare a state of disaster, but treat it as a state of disaster, which means the president and the cabinet must stay out of the way. They must appoint 4 groups of interrelated complementary expertise: engineers, logistic managers, financial managers, and administrators, to turn the organization around, but not be told by them, this minister and that minister, turn right, turn left. No, they must stay out of them. The president must use the constitutional power vested in him to get every obstacle out of the way of this team. And then, much like the state of disaster behavior, every month this team must report to the nation, not to the president, not to the Minister of Energy or Minister of State Enterprises. These ministers have not glorified themselves in any way or shape. That team needs to report to the nation to say, this is our plan, this is how we're going to do it, this is where we need help, this is how much money we need, this is how much time we need. The ANC coming and saying 2 years, Gwede Mantaj coming 6 months, Parveen Gordon saying 18 months. These are hot air. These are as good as me piloting a 747 aeroplane. It's just not trustworthy. It's not the way to do it. So I think the focus on a behavior or a focus national attention, such as a state of disaster, is correct. Declaration of a state of disaster, quite frankly, is a very, very shallow and misguided, and in fact, to some extent, insulting the nation, thinking that we can trust a bunch of horse trading politicians to decide that this is how this massive issue will be dealt with, whether it's in 1 year or 2 years. So I think we need to focus. We really, our businesses, and I think Mr. Mburela also acknowledged, everybody knows it, our business is facing state of disaster, and we cannot waste more time in these type of hot air discussions.
Iraj, you asked the question of we should take a look at what should be done, and the ANC believes that the state of disaster is an answer to that. In fact, going as far as saying that South Africans should rally behind the state of disaster. Let's play out the scenario that this then does go through. It's all done in the name of unlocking funds to make them available. You've pointed out it's more nuanced than that, but should it go through, how will it work and where will the money come from?
Look, that would, I assume, this is where the danger lies. I assume some people in the ANC thinks that then by declaring state of disaster, all the rules and constraints on the national treasury will be lifted, so they can just print money or borrow money and buy diesels or pay to the networks of corruption within Eskom. So I think that's where the danger lies. And I sincerely hope that the president will talk to government, not talk to the ANC, talk to not politicians, talk to the technicians as to how this thing should be dealt with professionally. So, but if we suspend the national restrictions on how the money should be spent, how it should be governed, subject to what terms and conditions, then you will have a similar type of thing that happened under a state of disaster when the Minister of Health would spend hundreds of millions without any restrictions. And then it turned out to be that it blew up in his own face and in the face of the nation. That's the danger. And here we're talking about hundreds of billions that would be needed. And we cannot suspend those codes of good corporate governance for national finances in the name of a state of disaster. It's not a question of money. I have said it, many others have said it. Eskom's problem, energy problem, is not a question of money. If we had done the right thing, remember Eskom at the moment as we speak has got 400 billion losses. Or debt, so to speak. These are the stolen money that state capture left as a legacy for us. If I had to spend half of that, every poor household and every middle class household in the country today would have their own energy with 200 billion rand, not with 400. So I think we need to be very, very level-headed here, suspending all the regulations and getting the national treasury to borrow and squander it again, this time in the name of another type of state of disaster, is going to leave ourselves and our children for decades of real disaster to follow.
I mean, how then do we understand this? Because also you've got a lot of countries having pledged money during COP27 for South Africa to do its just energy transition. To your point of this debt that future generation will have to deal with, this is something we could ill afford, economically at least.
And I would say not only economically, socially. As we speak, there are hospitals, there are schools, there are old age homes, there are courts, there are traffic lights that are causing havoc in the poor and the working class lives. The rich can take care of themselves. They are frustrated, they are exasperated, but they have means of sorting themselves out. The majority of our people cannot. And therefore, it's not just a question of an economic issue. It's a question of social suffering that happens because we try to do the wrong thing, not learning from our past mistakes. So, yes, it's economically a problematic one. And the commitment that other nations have made to the so-called transition, and I hesitate to use just transition, because there is nothing more unjust that we have now. That some politicians use this term and we think this is a fascinating term, but they don't understand what they're talking about. There is nothing just about what they're doing. It's not a just transition. It's an absolutely disastrous, unjust, cruel transition that they are not doing. Other countries have done it. We need to learn from them. And other countries' commitment in terms of this transition is not going to come if we don't have a credible way of spending that money. The committed money, is subject to proper implementation of a sensible, feasible, technically sound transition. They're not going to give the money just because we say just transition, just because we can manage our affairs. Those taxpayers are not going to let that money come without conditions. So we need to demonstrate that we have learned from our mistakes, that we want to do the right thing, we want to get the politicians who are incompetent out of the way, put in place technicians who have the combined competencies of turning the situation around, then money will flow, not the other way around.
Dr. Abedian, always a pleasure. Dr. Iraj Abedian, economist and chief executive of Pan-African Investments and Research Services.